A millionaire discovered a black woman crying in his garden and found out she was the mother of his child. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from today. The sound of the water fountain was the only friend Dorian Thorne had during his lonely mornings in the garden of his big house in Greenwich, Connecticut. He was 52 years old. He had made a big company in technology, but his huge garden made him feel even more alone. One September morning, something different happened. A woman was kneeling next to the bushes with blue flowers. She was shaking quietly and crying softly. Dorian stopped and held his coffee cup in the air. In all the 20 years he lived there, he never saw anyone come inside without asking. "Excuse me," Dorian said in his deep voice. "How did you get in here?" The woman stood up quickly. She had a tired but still pretty face, with gray hair and blue eyes full of tears. She looked at him and said, "Dorian, you haven't changed much." Dorian looked at her carefully. There was something about her face he remembered, like a song he once heard but forgot the words. "Excuse me, but have we met before?" he asked. "My name is Sable Keaton," she said, wiping her tears with her hand. Dorian felt the world spinning around him. He dropped his cup, and it broke on the ground. Sable Keaton. That summer, before his company became big, when he was still just a programmer with big dreams. Sable, her name was soft like a whisper. After that summer, she disappeared. Dorian asked, "Why?" "I had to go," Sable said, nervously holding her hands. "I found out something a few weeks later, but you had already moved. Nobody knew where you lived." Dorian's heart started beating fast. Sable's voice sounded serious. It was like she was telling him his life would change forever. "What did you find out, Sable?" he asked. "I was pregnant," Sable said quietly. The words hit Dorian like heavy stones in a deep lake. "Our son Elias is in the hospital. He needs a special bone marrow transplant. You are the only one who can help." Dorian's world went blurry. He had a son he never knew about. For 29 years, a boy was living in the world with half of Dorian's genes, breathing, growing, living, and Dorian didn't know. "Why did you wait so long to tell me?" Dorian asked, sounding angry. "I tried to find you when I knew," Sable said. "Then, later, when I saw how successful you were, I didn't want Elias to think we were after your money." Dorian felt weak and sat on a bench. Memories of that summer in Boston came back. Warm nights, laughter in the bar, whispered plans under the stars. Sable was more than just a summer crush. She was a time when life seemed simple and happy. "What is he like?" Dorian asked before he could stop himself. Sable smiled sadly and took her phone from her purse. "He has your eyes and your love for solving problems." She showed Dorian a photo. It was a young man, smiling in front of a board filled with difficult math problems. He wore a white coat with the letters MIT on it. "He's an assistant professor of physics," Sable said proudly, "but he was diagnosed with leukemia 3 months ago." Dorian's mind started working fast. "What did the doctors say?" Sable nodded. "He needs the transplant soon. I know this is a lot to take in. I have no right to come here and change your life like this. But he's our son, Dorian, and he is very sick." Dorian looked again at the photo. Elias looked like him, the same forehead and nose. How many mornings had Dorian spent in this garden, feeling lonely without knowing why? How many times had he wondered if there was more to life than work? "Give me the hospital's address," Dorian said firmly for the first time. "Tell me everything on the way." As he drove Sable to her car, passing his shiny cars that now seemed unimportant, Dorian realized his old life was over. Something new, scary, but very important had begun. He had a chance to meet his son and maybe save him. The hospital was big and tall, shining in the sunlight. Dorian held the steering wheel of his Mercedes very tightly. Sable talked all the way from Greenwich to Boston about Elias, how he won a science prize when he was 12, how he skipped 2 school years, and how much he loved stars and space. "Does he know I'm coming?" Dorian asked as he parked. "No," Sable said, nervously fixing her bag. "I didn't want to give him hope if it didn't work out. They took the elevator to the 6th floor, the place where sick children got care. The hallways were quiet and clean. Nurses were busy. The visitors looked worried. Sable stopped in front of a door. "Are you ready?" she asked. Dorian wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready to meet a son they never knew? But he nodded. Inside the room, Elias sat near the window in a big chair. He had a laptop on his knees, and a machine was helping him with medicine through a tube in his arm. He looked up when they came in, and Dorian's heart stopped. Elias looked like a younger version of himself. "Mom?" Elias asked, looking between Sable and Dorian. Sable's voice shook a little. "This is Dorian Thorne, your father." Elias almost dropped his laptop, but caught it quickly and closed it carefully. Dorian saw that move. He did the same when he needed time to think about shocking news. "My father," Elias said slowly, "Dorian Thorne from Thorne Tech. You changed the world with quantum computers." Dorian was surprised. "You know my work?" Elias smiled without humor. "Your work helped me decide to study physics." They sat quietly. Dorian wanted to say more, but didn't know how. "I didn't know about you," he said finally. "If I had known," Dorian started. "Please, no family drama now," Elias said, raising his hand. "I know about my illness. I want you to help. Run the tests, but I know it's risky, and I don't want you to feel forced." Dorian stepped closer. "I lost 29 years of your life. Let me try not to lose more." Elias looked out the window at the boats on the river. "When I was little, I made up stories about you. I thought you were a secret scientist or explorer on an important trip. I never thought you were really changing the world with quantum computers." Dorian's throat tightened. "I never thought I'd have a son smart enough to understand my work." Elias smiled a little. "Looks like the apple doesn't fall far from the quantum tree." A nurse came in and said it was time for Elias's medicine. Dorian noticed Elias was still using his mother's last name, Keaton. Elias Thorne sounded too fancy for a boy from Boston suburbs, Dorian thought. Elias shrugged but winced when the nurse fixed his medicine tube. Dorian watched his son fight the sickness quietly and with strength. How many times did Elias suffer alone? How many moments did Dorian miss? "Tell me about your work at MIT, Dorian said, pulling a chair close. "I heard you study string theory." Elias's eyes lit up, and for the next hour, father and son talked about physics and science. Sable watched them from the door, tears falling silently. She saw the start of a connection that should have been there for a long time. The hospital lab was quiet one morning. Dorian watched the doctor get ready to take his blood for tests. His mind went back to the busy week since he met Elias. Every day, he came back to the hospital, changing his work plans. "This will sting a little," Dr. Marcus Calder said, putting the needle in Dorian's arm. Dorian hardly felt it. He was thinking about the big meeting he had to cancel the night before. He told his company on video call that he needed to take time off for urgent family matters. News spread fast that Dorian Thorne, the busy businessman, had a sick son. His phone didn't stop ringing. The doctor finished and said, "We will know if you are a match in 48 hours. Dorian pressed cotton on his arm. "What if I'm not a match?" "There are other options," the doctor said kindly. "But since you're the father, the chances are good." Leaving the lab, Dorian found Sable waiting. Over the days, they developed a quiet way to share the time. One with Elias, the other resting or thinking. "How is he today?" Dorian asked, tired. "The last chemo was strong," Sable said. "Leora is with him now." Dorian felt a knot in his stomach. Leora Amani was Elias's fiancée. She came from a faraway place to be with him. She was smart, kind, and clearly loved Elias very much. But she wasn't sure about Dorian being there suddenly. "Does he hate me?" Dorian asked quietly. Sable looked surprised. "No, he's just thinking. Leora thinks you're here because you feel guilty. But Leora is just protecting Elias." Sable's eyes were full of tears. She had watched Elias fight his sickness for months. She saw how he taught others even when he was very sick, how he didn't let the disease take over his life. Dorian closed his eyes for a moment. He's amazing, Sable. You did a great job raising him. Sable sat down. We didn't have much money, but Elias never missed important things. He had special helpers and teachers to guide him because he was very smart. But everything changed when he met Leora while studying for his doctorate in science. She was his one true love. How did you handle all of this? Dorian asked, waving his hand around. After I became famous, it got complicated, Sable said with a sad smile. Alex was only 16 when his picture started appearing in magazines about technology. He would spend many hours reading your interviews and articles. Sable smiled sadly again. I think that was his way of trying to know you, even from far away. Dorian felt very sad and full of guilt. I should have been there for him. You didn't know, Sable said softly, and now you are here. Dorian's phone buzzed. Another recaller wanted to talk about the story. But he is going to see him, Dorian said, standing up. Sable called after him. He has his TED Talk presentation saved on his laptop. All of them. Dorian felt a warm, sad feeling in his chest as he walked up to the 6th floor. When he got close to room 612, he heard voices. You don't have to pretend you're okay all the time, Leora said softly. I'm not pretending. Elias's voice sounded hoarse. I'm just trying to understand how my life turned into a reality TV show overnight. No one would blame you if you wanted to stay away from all this. He's very smart, Leora said. Yesterday we talked for 2 hours about using quantum computing to study black holes. For the first time, I found someone who not only understands me, but also challenges my ideas. Alex, Leora continued, when I look at him, I see parts of myself I never understood. The way I think and solve problems, even some little habits. It's like finding puzzle pieces I didn't know were missing. Dorian leaned on the wall outside. His heart hurt as he listened. Leora sighed. I just don't want you to get hurt. If he's not a good match for the transplant, or if something goes wrong after, she said. I know the risks, Elias said gently, but for the first time since the diagnosis, I feel like I have more to gain than to lose. Dorian cleared his throat and knocked on the door. He walked inside. Elias was back in bed, looking paler than usual. Leora held his hand. An open laptop showed a paused presentation. Dorian saw his own face on the screen. Hey, Elias smiled weakly. Come to check my needle scars? Dorian joked, pulling up a chair. I came to ask your opinion on a theory I'm working on, Dorian said. Would you be my unofficial reviewer? Elias's eyes lit up with interest. Leora smiled a little. Father and son started talking about science again. No one talked about tears in their eyes or the precious time slipping away as they waited for test results that could change everything, or maybe nothing. Dr. Calder held the test results in his hands. His face was calm like a doctor should be. Dorian, Sable, Leora, and Elias, who was in his wheelchair, sat tensely in the doctor's office. The results show an 80% match, Dr. Calder finally said. The room felt like the air was taken away, like an airplane door opened in mid-flight. Leora squeezed Elias's shoulder. Sable covered her mouth with her hands. Dorian stayed very still. Is that enough? Elias asked firmly. It's more than enough, Dr. Calder said. It's an exceptionally good match. We can schedule the transplant for next week after a final round of chemotherapy to get the system ready. What are the risks? Leora asked, worried. Bone marrow donation is safe, Dr. Calder explained. There will be some discomfort for a few days or maybe a week. Nothing life-threatening. Dorian finally moved and leaned forward. When can we start, Dad? Elias asked softly. It was the first time he used the word Dad, and it felt like lightning in the room. You don't have to say that, Alex, Dorian said. Please let me do this, Elias said. Dr. Calder cleared his throat. We need to talk about the pre-transplant plan. Elias will need strong chemotherapy to get rid of his old marrow. That will be the hardest time in the treatment. The next 2 hours were filled with doctors explaining things, signing papers, and making plans. When they left the office, Elias was too tired to argue when Dorian said he would push his wheelchair. "I'll get your medicine from the pharmacy," Sable said, exchanging a meaningful look with Leora. Leora muttered something about making phone calls and left too. Father and son were alone in the hospital hall. 80%, Elias whispered almost to himself. "The odds are on our side." "Do you believe in fate?" Dorian asked, surprising himself. "I believe in math and cause and effect," Elias said, looking up at his dad. "But the last few days have made me question some things I always believed." They went into the family room where a nurse was getting the chemotherapy ready. Dorian helped Elias move to the bed. He noticed how much weight his son had lost in the last few weeks. "You know what's funny?" Elias said as the nurse put the needle in his arm. "I spent years studying the biggest questions in the universe. Dark matter, vacuum energy, string theory, but none of that prepared me for," he pointed between them, "this life." Dorian smiled and sat in his usual chair. "Did you know," Dorian said, "that in college I wanted to be a musician?" Elias raised his eyebrows. "A classical piano player. My teachers said I had talent, but then I found programming, and that changed everything." Dorian smiled again. "Your mom told me you play the violin," he said. "I used to," Elias corrected him, "but chemotherapy made my hands shaky. It was just a hobby, not a passion." They sat quietly as the chemotherapy started. Dorian watched his son face the pain. He saw the same strong will in Elias that he saw in himself every morning in the mirror. "Alex," Dorian started carefully, "after this is over, after you get better, I was thinking—" "Yes?" Elias asked. "There's a private observatory on my estate in Greenwich. It's very fancy with the best telescopes. I never really used it. It was just a rich man's toy. But maybe when you're stronger—" Elias's face lit up with excitement. "Really? What kind of equipment do you have there?" The next few hours flew by as they talked about telescopes and space research, as if cancer was only a small problem and they had all the time in the world. That evening, alone in his hotel room, Dorian opened his laptop and started looking up the best violins money could buy. Because, for the first time in his life, he was planning a future that was not just about codes and computers. A future that, if he was lucky, would have violin music in the observatory as he and his son looked at the stars together. But first, they had to get through the next week. The operating room at Massachusetts General Hospital was full of clean white halls and many doors. Dorian wore a blue hospital gown and watched as the doctors prepared for the bone marrow collection. On the other side of the hospital, Elias was starting his last chemotherapy session before the transplant. "Mr. Thorne," the anesthesiologist said with a kind smile, "are you ready?" Dorian nodded and lay down on the operating table. As the oxygen mask came near his face, he thought about Elias and how much the last few weeks had changed everything. "Count backwards from 10, the doctor told him. 10, 9, 8. The world went dark. "Dorian, are you waking up?" Sable's voice broke through the fog. Dorian blinked. His mouth was dry like cotton. "Is everything okay?" "Perfectly," Sable said. "They collected more bone marrow than we needed. Alex is getting the first part right now." Dorian tried to sit up, but sharp pain in his back stopped him. His back was sore where they took the marrow. "I want to see him." "Not today," Sable said firmly. "You need to rest. And Alex is very weak right now. The last chemo was the strongest." Dorian closed his eyes, feeling frustrated. In the last few weeks, he had spent many hours in room 612 talking with Elias about physics, technology, and slowly about life. Each talk was like finding a new chapter in a book he never knew existed. "Is Leora with him?" "Yes, and she promised to keep us updated every hour." A quiet calm filled the room. It was strange how, after so many years, there was still a familiar feeling between them. Like time was something you could change, like in the math equations Dorian and Elias loved to talk about. She showed me the ring yesterday, Dorian said softly. The one he bought for Leora before she got sick. Sable smiled. It's beautiful, isn't it? He saved money for months. He planned to order it after the conference in Singapore, but now he should order it. Don't wait, Dorian said. Life is too short to wait for the perfect moment, Sable said softly. We both know that better than anyone. She looked at him for a moment. Her eyes were gentle. You've changed. Having a child die changes what matters. He's not dying, Sable said strongly. Not anymore, thanks to you. Dorian tried to move again, this time slowly. Can you help me up? I need to make a phone call. Sable helped him sit on the edge of the bed. He picked up his phone. Orion. Yes, it's me. I need you to do something. That French restaurant on Beacon Hill, Le Baller. Book the whole place for tomorrow night. He paused. Yes, I know my son is in the hospital. That's exactly why I need the restaurant. And Orion, call the decorator who did the company lobby. I want the place turned into an observatory. Stars, planets, galaxies, everything. No, I don't care about the cost. Just make it happen. When he hung up, Sable looked at him with a face hard to read. What's wrong? Nothing, he smiled, just thinking about how funny life is. The Dorian I knew could barely afford a meal at McDonald's. The Dorian you knew didn't know what he was missing, he said softly. Sable's phone buzzed. She read a message from Leora. Her face changed. What is it? Dorian, his fever has gone up. That's normal at this stage, Sable said, biting her lip. The next few days will be the hardest. Dorian felt pain in his back, but something inside felt small and far away. Take me to him. Dorian, you just had surgery. Please, Sable's voice broke a little. I can't just stand here while he... She looked at him for a long time and sighed. I'll get a wheelchair, but only for 15 minutes. You can't go into the room. Just look through the window. 15 minutes later, Dorian watched through the glass. Leora was putting cold cloths on Elias's face. His son looked paler than ever. His lips were moving, but Dorian couldn't hear the words. He's saying math numbers, Sable said softly. It's what he does when he is in pain. Saying the numbers helps him think about something else. Dorian pressed his hand against the glass. Elias opened his eyes for a moment. His eyes met his father's. A small smile came on his lips. Then he closed his eyes again. Pi is 3.14159, Dorian began to say quietly. Planck's constant is 6.62 times 10 to the minus 34. Beside him, Sable quietly wiped away a tear. A father and son were separated by a glass window, but they were connected by numbers and love. They waited together for the doctors to do their work. The place called La Pala had changed into a space full of stars. Twinkling stars hung from the ceiling. Colorful pictures of space clouds moved across the walls. Each table had a tiny planetarium, a little show of stars and planets, but the restaurant was empty except for Dorian. He was nervously fixing a special machine that made holograms in the middle of the room. Mr. Thorne, Dorian's helper, came into the doorway. The hospital called, he said. Dr. Keaton got worse in the last hour. Dr. Amani canceled her visit. No, Dorian said quickly, grabbing his coat. Keep everything the same. Keep the place ready. We'll be back soon. He didn't finish his words. He was already running to his car. When Dorian got to Massachusetts General Hospital, it was busy and ready for emergencies. Sable was in the hallway, twisting her hands and looking tired. The fever won't go away, she said. They rushed into the room. Dorian heard nurses and doctors moving quickly. A doctor named Dr. Calder came in fast and said, He has something called a cytokine storm. Dorian asked, Is that normal? Dr. Calder said, His body is fighting too hard against the new bone marrow. It's not usual for it to be this strong. We are giving medicine to calm it down. The next 24 hours are very important. Inside the room, Leora held Elias's hand. She whispered something in his ear. Machines around them beeped all at once. Elias's body shook with fever. His lips moved silently like he was saying a prayer. Dorian came closer and spoke softly. He's still here. Leora shook her head. Not anymore. Now he's trying to solve some math problem about black holes. He says he has to finish it. Her voice was quiet and broken. Dorian leaned over the bed. Alex, son, I'm here. Elias opened his eyes slowly. He was hot and tired, but still focused. The equation, he said softly. Hawking radiation, the numbers are wrong. Dorian took a notebook and pen from the bedside table. Tell me and we'll figure it out together. For 1 whole hour, while doctors and nurses came and went, the father and son worked on a hard science problem. It probably had no real answer, but it didn't matter. It helped Elias think about something else, not about pain or fear. At one point, Elias whispered, "We think time moves in a straight line, but what if time goes in circles near a black hole?" Dorian wrote quickly, "That's a great idea, Alex." But Elias didn't answer. His eyes closed, and the machines started beeping louder. Leora stood up, worried. "Alex," she called. Dr. Calder and his team rushed into the room again, moving fast but carefully. "Everyone else, please leave," the doctor said. Leora held Elias's hand tightly, but a nurse gently took her away. In the hallway, Dorian held Sable when her legs became weak. "He's strong," Dorian said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "He will make it." Time passed slowly, like cold honey dripping. After what felt like forever, Dr. Calder came out of the room. "We have made him stable," he said. "The fever is starting to go down. The worst is over." Leora sat down in a chair, crying. Sable hugged Dorian, who was shaking without noticing. "Can I see him?" Dorian asked, his voice breaking. Dr. Calder nodded. "He's sleeping now. His body is starting to accept the new marrow." Dorian quietly walked back into the room. Elias looked younger in his sleep. The pain lines on his face were softer now. The notebook on the bedside table still had Elias's last math work. A beautiful dance of numbers that helped him stay alive. "You know," Dorian said softly as he sat next to the bed, "you made a new theory about Hawking radiation while fighting a cytokine storm. I think that deserves to be published." Dorian thought he saw a small smile on Elias's lips. Picking up the notebook, Dorian began to write down and expand on his son's ideas from the fever. Because that's what fathers do, right? They take their children's dreams and help make them real, even if it takes 29 years to start. In Dorian's coat pocket, a small velvet box with a ring waited for the right moment. He had helped Leora pick this new ring, a diamond that looked like a little star. Now, that moment seemed close. 3 weeks after the crisis, Elias took his first unsteady steps down the hospital hallway. Leora walked close behind, ready to help him. Dorian and Sable watched with a mix of pride and worry. "The latest test results are good," Dr. Calder had said earlier. "The new bone marrow is working perfectly. If it keeps going well, we can think about letting him leave the hospital in a week." Dorian watched his son walk slowly back to his room. Elias's hair was growing back in a dark shade that Leora loved to stroke. His cheeks, once hollow from sickness, were starting to look healthy again. "I think I deserve a prize for this walk," Elias joked as he sat in his favorite chair by the window. "How about a surprise?" Dorian said with a smile, looking at Leora. Elias looked suspicious. The word father now came out easily, like it always had. "I just need to make a quick call," Dorian said, leaving the room. In the hallway, he dialed Orion. "Is everything ready?" "Yes," his assistant said. "The restaurant is exactly as you asked. The star pictures have been updated with new data from the Hubble telescope." "Perfect. We'll be there in an hour." Back in the room, Dorian found Elias showing Leora something on his laptop. "Look," Elias said, pointing at the screen. "If we think about how space and time curve near a black hole, the equations we worked on during my fever actually make sense." Dorian asked, surprised. "You remember that?" Elias smiled. "I found your notes and finished it. You made my fever ideas into something that works." Dorian moved closer. "I already sent the paper for review. Your name is first author." Elias blinked, shocked. "You did what?" 3 reviewers already gave positive comments, Dorian said. Almost dying while solving quantum physics problems gives unique ideas. Leora laughed at Elias's surprised face. I think you just won your walking prize, Dorian chuckled. There's more. If you're up for a little adventure. Half an hour later, after promising Dr. Calder they'd return in less than 2 hours, they were on their way to the restaurant. Leora helped Elias put on a navy blue sweater that matched his eyes, Dorian's eyes, as Sable always reminded him. When they entered the restaurant, Elias stopped at the door, speechless. The place was like a private planetarium. Stars danced across the walls. A detailed picture of the Milky Way galaxy spun gently in the middle. Elias turned to Dorian. This is what you planned that day? Dorian nodded. I thought it would be a good place for a certain question you've been waiting to ask. Elias looked at Leora, who was smiling with tears in her eyes. Did you know your father can be very persuasive when he wants something? She said softly. Dorian took a small velvet box from his pocket and gave it to Elias. The ring you bought was beautiful, he said, but I thought this one fits an astrophysicist better. When Elias opened the box, the diamond in the middle caught the light from the stars above, making its own little shining galaxy. It's a natural diamond, Dorian explained, made by the same forces that created the stars you study. Elias looked at his father, then at Leora, then at the ring. His hands shook a little as he kneeled down. Leora, he said, his voice full of feeling, you have been my constant in this crazy time. When everything was chaos and fear, your love kept me steady. Dorian stepped back quietly to give them their moment. Sable wiped away tears. They will be very happy, she whispered. Yes, Dorian said, watching Elias put the ring on Leora's finger. The artificial stars danced around them. Later, as they ate a special meal made for the occasion, Elias looked at Dorian. That observatory in Greenwich, he said. Is it still there? Dorian smiled. I made some upgrades. There's a new piano in the next room. A piano? Elias said. Dorian nodded. I thought we could play music again. You with your violin, me on the piano. Elias studied his father and smiled, a smile just like Dorian's that sometimes scared people. You know, he said, I think I still have a lot to learn about you. And me about you, Dorian said. But now we have time. Under the stars of the restaurant, father and son raised their glasses silently to the future. A future none of them knew they needed so much, just 3 months ago. The mansion in Greenwich was different that spring afternoon. Music floated through the gardens, the violin and piano notes dancing together, making a beautiful harmony that even the birds stopped to listen to. Dorian smiled as his fingers moved on the piano keys, playing along with Elias's violin in a song by Beethoven. 6 months after the transplant, Elias had his health back, and his skill with the violin too. Through the music room window, Dorian saw Leora and Sable outside, talking about the wedding to happen in 2 weeks. The music ended. Elias put down his violin and smiled. Not bad for a couple of scientists, he said, sitting beside his father on the piano bench. Your mother told me you never stopped playing, even during your hardest studies. It helped me relax when the math was too hard, Elias said, running his fingers gently over the piano keys. Dorian looked at his strong, healthy son. The tests showed the leukemia was gone. The paper about Hawking radiation had been published last month and was talked about by many scientists. Did you finish that last part of your theory? Dorian asked. Almost, Elias said. Leora suggested a new idea using quantum shapes. Just then, Leora came into the room. Alex, your mother wants your opinion on the flowers. Since when do I know about flowers? Elias asked, laughing, but he got up anyway. Leora decided that her son, a physics genius, needed to help choose the flower decorations for the wedding. Leora laughed when Elias left. Leora stood in the doorway and looked at Dorian. Did he tell you about MIT? She asked. Dorian nodded. The school gave Elias his old job back. He can work from home when he wants. Dorian said, What about our choice to live here in Greenwich? Leora asked. Dorian looked surprised. Alex figured out he can teach his classes online 3 days a week, Leora explained. On the other 2 days, we will travel to Boston. The train takes only 1 hour, she added. She paused and said, also, there is the observatory and you will have plenty of time to rest. Dorian felt something warm inside his chest. Leora, you saved his life, he said softly. Leora smiled. Not just with the bone marrow, she said. You gave him something he always wanted but never said out loud. She smiled again. Besides, someone needs to make sure you two don't spend all your nights in that observatory talking about crazy things like black holes. From the garden, Elias's voice called out, Leora, I need some science help here. Mom is trying to tell me that white roses are too plain. Leora laughed and walked away, leaving Dorian alone with the piano and his thoughts. He played a few soft notes. He remembered that day in the garden 6 months ago when he found Sable crying by the hydrangeas. The hydrangeas were blooming again now, and their colors were bright and beautiful. Just like the flowers, the life that started from that sad day was now rich and full, more than he had ever dreamed. The door to the music room opened again. Elias came back, looking a little tired. Looks like we are going to have a mix of blue hydrangeas and white lilies, he said as he sat down at the piano. Mother says the flowers stand for the joining of two families or something. Dorian smiled. Your mother always loved symbols and special meanings, he said. Elias took an envelope out of his pocket. I want to show you this before I send it, he said. Dorian opened the envelope and saw a pretty wedding invitation. His eyes filled with tears as he read it. Alexandra Leora Amani and Elias Dorian Thorne invite you to celebrate their love, Dorian said softly. Elias, that's my middle name. Mom changed it on my papers last week. I thought you should know, Elias said. Dorian couldn't say anything. He put his hands on the piano keys and started to play. This time, it was not Beethoven but a new song he had started making during the long nights in the hospital. Elias picked up his violin. Without looking at music sheets, he began to play along. He added his own part to the music. From the garden, Sable and Leora stopped talking about flowers. They listened. The music floated in the air. The song carried all the feelings from the last few months. The pain, love, sadness, and hope. It was a song about second chances and new beginnings. It was about lost time and time found again. It was about a father and son who found each other through science, saved each other through love, and now made music together. When the last note slowly disappeared into the air, Elias looked at his father. I think we finally found our universal constant, he said softly. Dorian nodded. In a universe full of change and surprises, they had found something that would never change. The strong bond between father and son. It was deeper than space and stronger than time. It was as important as the laws of physics. And like a good universal constant, it was always there, just waiting to be found. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.